Hello and welcome to the Shinybees podcast, a podcast for those who like their knitting, comedy and yarn in equally large measures. I'm your host Jo Mulmine and this is episode 89. Paula Abdul would be proud.
I feel a need to laugh again with you, if that's alright. I need a drink, I need a friend.
Hello and welcome into another episode of the show, a little later than Bill this week. But here nonetheless with you today, you have me, your host Jo Mulmine, on the Shinybees podcast. Welcome. If you are a new listener, hello. I hope you enjoy what you find on the show today. And if you're a returning listener, thank you for joining me again. I really appreciate you sharing an hour of your week, or sometimes a little bit less, hanging out with me, talking all things knitty, crafty and general fun. I think we like to have quite a bit of fun on the show. So the show is a little bit later than planned this week, and it was for a good reason. I unexpectedly had to take my little Sanimal out of the nursery that he was in because of issues basically, and with no notice, and find him a new nursery, which isn't the easiest thing to do. It's quite stressful. He's got a speech delay as well, so he's under speech and language, so I wanted somewhere that were good with that sort of stuff too. So when you're trying to fit that in with everything else that you do, and school runs for other children and geographical and traffic limitations and everything else, as well as actually finding a place, it's a bit tricky. Not my ideal to do item for Tuesday, but these things must be done. So basically that meant that all work for the week was shelved until today, when he's gone into his lovely new school that he seems to like very much. I asked him, we went to visit on Thursday for a settling in session. I said, "Oh, do you like it?" And he went, I love it, mummy, I love it." So it went down quite well. Obviously, after the hour, I had to drag him out kicking and screaming, as you do, because they don't listen to you in public, because they know they can smell the fear. They can smell the fear. They know you're not going to kick off. They know that you're not going to, give them some bollocking or, make them sit on a step or anything like that, because you're in public, so you've got to behave yourself. And they know this. So he was like, yeah, whatever, mummy, I'm off. I'm playing in the kitchen. I'm done with you type thing. So he ran in happily this morning, very excited. Went and sat on the mat and signed himself in. They've got to sign themselves in, found the name and found the sign, a big sheet of paper on the table and stuff. It just scribbled on it. Not a bother. Just like, I'll just scribble here for when I'm famous. They'll be, be selling this on when I'm famous. So we've had quite a fun little week. Instead of working like I would normally do, and my work is very fun, I ended up indulging in some cafe culture with my little Sanimal, which sounds lovely, and it is obviously lovely to hang out with him and go eat scones with some cute little, preschooler. But he's deadly. He's an absolute terror. He's such a flirt that everywhere you go, there's little old ladies cooing and falling over, fainting, and he's laughing at them, and he wears little glasses. If you've seen pictures of him on Instagram, so he looks over his glasses, and he's got really long eyelashes that kind of bat against his glasses, so he bats his eyelashes at them, and he giggles at them and pretends he's shy, and it's just that borderline between being embarrassed at how blatant he is and being really proud of this clear talent, this superpower he has for charming anyone that comes within sort of 5 feet of him. So I'm sure he's got his key worker wrapped around his little pinky finger already with his cuteness and his, batting his eyelids. But he's in his new place now, and hopefully that will be the end of that, if you will. So it's not been, the ideal week of getting after half term, let's get back into it, let's get back into work, and I've got all these big plans. It's not quite turned out the way I planned, but, this is a good result by the end of the week. So it's a little bit late on the podcast, but I'm sure you will all understand why that has had to be the case. I've been doing a bit of travelling recently. I went off on a little trip to the States for a weekend to a conference, which was really exciting and a bit different. The States is brutal. It's just like, wow, crazy. I'm so British now. There's nothing makes you feel more British than going somewhere where you're not in Britain and there are no Brits, particularly if the non-Brits don't understand your sense of humour. It can be a little bit tricky. I'm blessed with lots of lovely American listeners who get it, but there's a lot of Americans who just don't get the British sense of humour at all. So quite often I was sat there with the sort of tumbleweed moment thinking, well, am I really not that funny? And then I was like, no, you just really don't get my jokes. It's fine. I can't trust you because you don't laugh at my jokes, but it's fine that you don't understand them. So I've had lots of cool, interesting stuff on and exciting plans for what's going to come next, and obviously came back full of, you know, everything to like, right, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that and this is my plan. And then I've just had basically 15 hours lopped off my work week, at best 10 hours lopped off my work week, so I'm losing a week a month now because of this nursery stuff, because it's different hours. But you know, that just means that we're going to have to be a lot more selective. We're going to have to make sure that whatever we do is really worth doing in that time. You know, I firmly believe that you can build a business and do all that kind of stuff in whatever time frame you have available to you. You just need to be smart about it. So, yep, it's all still happening. It's just been a little bit like when it's your kids and stuff and you're trusting people to look after them, you know, you do take it very personally. It does knock your confidence if you find out that the place that you very carefully chose wasn't what they said they were. So, anyway, no need to worry about any of that stuff. He's fine. Nothing bad happened to him. He's bulletproof. So what have we got on the show for you today? Well, I have a little bit of quick shiny related news regarding my next thing, if you will. I've got some news about Yarn Shop Day and where I'm going to be then, along with a lot of other very cool people. And I also have a review of the London Craft Guide. And then I've got a bit of Wippin Piccadilly news. It's been probably about a month, so time to update on the projects and what I've been working on slowly, very slowly, Pico bind off, over the last few weeks. So get yourself a cup of tea, get comfy, get your knitting, put your feet up, get some cosy slippers on, and we will crack on with the show. So first up, a little bit of shiny news. When I did the listener survey back at the end of last year after the podcast awards, there was loads of really good feedback on that about what sort of stuff you would like to see, what good parts of the podcast there are, what parts you don't like so much, what things you would like to hear me talk about. And within that, there were a couple of themes. So there were a few requests for interviews with certain people, some of the same people, and I'm working on that for you. And there were some requests for things like having an alpaca month like the mohair month, and that sort of thing, which again, I'm working on fitting into my content calendar for the year. But there were also a lot of requests for business-related things and what sort of stuff people would like to hear about regarding that. So I've been having to think about how best to do it, because some people were asking for a separate blog and podcast, and the people who weren't necessarily that interested in that content were more, don't put that any more business stuff in than already is with the interviews and things, which is also fine as well. It's a knitting podcast, not a business podcast. But I wanted to do something that would help those people who want the knitting, businessy, small business type content to be expanded. So I am in the middle of creating something to address that. In the meantime, I have created an open Facebook group. I know a lot of people don't like Facebook groups, but it's Facebook. Don't fight it. I don't even like Facebook, but they dominate everything and they make it too easy for us all not to be on there because they're evil geniuses. And not benign evil geniuses. I think they're probably not benign evil geniuses, but they're doing a very good job of making money. And it's over on there, and it's called Shinybees Hive. That's going to be the working sort of title / actual title of what I'm trying to create for people. And I'm in the middle of starting up a beta for that with some select individuals that I know very well or have worked with before, so I can get all of that ready. But in the meantime, there is a totally free group that you can join if you're interested in running a small business in the knitting industry or elsewhere, or you want to get tips on, particularly my thing is strategy and systems is what I do. I can do PR, I can do a lot of other things, but I like strategy and systems mostly. So organising things, getting everything run really efficiently, making sure that whatever you do is worthwhile and not just doing things for the sake of it, and how that all kind of translates into what you put out there in the world, your marketing plan, and how the strategy and marketing come together, basically, because a lot of people struggle with that. So as I say, it'll be a free group. I'll be in there chatting, sharing resources, answering questions, all that kind of shizzle. And that's sort of my way, basically, of offering all those who are interested in the business stuff a little bit more of what they like. Because I can't at this stage commit to a whole podcast. And I can't necessarily do a whole blog on it at this stage, because there's something else that I'm working on as well in the meantime. And hashtag constraints, only got 25 hours a week to do it in now. But I wanted a place for you all to gather together, because I know there's a lot of people who just come for the knitting. There's a lot of people who come from the Dogs in Knitwear, and there's a lot of people who come for helpful tips about how to save time and be more efficient, and how to put systems into your business so that you can outsource things, or that it makes it easier for you to run if you want to remain just you in the business, so that we can, bring in software and all sorts of things to make it easier. So I'll put a link in the show notes to that. It's a closed group. You can request to join. It's called Shinybees Hive, (open), because there will be a pro version. And come on over if you're interested in that sort of stuff. If you came to my webinar the other week, or came to one at Edinburgh or anything like that, and you want to find some other knitty business peeps or such like to join in with and chat to, then that will be a good place to do it. So come on over and join me there. Also in news, very excited, Yarn Shop Day, 30th of April 2016. It's in the UK. It's organised by Let's Knit Magazine and Let's Get Crafting. I am going to be partaking in some festivities at Countess Ablaze at her studio in Swinton in Manchester. She is having over for the day BritYarn, Isla of BritYarn, also a friend of the show, and purveyor of fine British breed yarns, only British yarns, very, very pro-British philosophy and woolly principled philosophy. You can find her over at brityarn.co.uk. Planning on getting her on the podcast for an interview too soon. And she's basically coming over with BritYarn and doing a trunk show in Countess Ablaze in her studio. And there's going to be cake and there's going to be fun. I'm going to be there. I think Louise Knit British is going to be there. Tons of cool people are going to be there. It's a great studio. It's really easy to get to from Manchester. You just get, for me, I can get a train and get off on the way to Manchester. But if you get a train to Manchester itself, and then you can get another train out to Swinton, it's about 15 minutes, and then it's a 5-minute walk from the train station. It's super, super easy to get there. She does I've been to her parties and I've been to her knit afternoons, and she does a brilliant spread and she does a fantastic party. So I would heartily recommend that you come along and join in with that. Now, I appreciate a lot of my listeners are not in the UK and are probably frustrated at missing out on this, so I will try and include you during the day. I don't know if I'll be on Periscope. I've sort of moved on from Periscope a little bit, but I may well be on Facebook Live or something like that. We'll be showing lots of Instagram photos. I'll take some video footage to share with you for something a bit different. I'm not really sure yet. I will wait and see what takes my fancy. But it will be colorific, calorific, and definitely a lot of fun. You can find everything to do with Countess Ablaze at www.countessablaze.com, including her fab yarns. There are not going to be any more updates to her website until after Yarn Shop Day, so she's dying just for that, so I'm super excited to see what she's going to have available. And BritYarn can be found at brityarn.co.uk. So on to the review. A review you were promised, a review you shall get today. I have made some notes as usual, so you might hear a little bit of crackling on the old paper. I only ever really write notes when I'm doing a review of something, so I don't forget everything that I thought about. Most of the time it's just like headings. I don't write scripts or anything, so that's why you don't often hear too much crackling unless I'm talking about a review. But anyway, today's review is the London Craft Guide by the girls at Yarn in the City, Alison Thistlewood and Rachel Brown. You may be familiar with them. They've been on the show before, and they actually interviewed me a few weeks ago for their show, and we talked about Yarny community. They're both based in London, but they are Canadian and American respectively. Alison is from Canada and Rachel is an American. And they live down in London, and they are also the organisers of the Great London Yarn Crawl, as well as the Yarn in the City Marketplace. So they very kindly sent me this book and asked me to review it, which of course I agreed to do, and here are my thoughts for you. I like it, just going straight in there with a spoiler, and I like the way that it is laid out, a bit like a Lonely Planet guide, like the Lonely Planet guide to yarn shops in London, really. It's quite reminiscent of that sort of style. It is quite a decent sized book that's split into 3 sections with regard to the actual information about what is available in terms of yarny and haberdashery and fabric shops in the London/Greater London area. I think this is quite a good approach because most people don't just do one thing. A lot of people who knit also sew. Everybody loves buttons and haberdashery and frippery and bits and pieces, accoutrements to adorn the knits, sews, crochets or whatever else they make. And it gives a really solid overview of all 3 of those sort of topics with shops listed underneath each one according to how skewed in that particular direction they are. And what do I mean by that? Well, a lot of yarn shops carry frippery as well, and buttons and haberdashery, and if it carries mostly yarn and a bit of haberdashery, it's under yarn shops. If it's all fabric and a bit of yarn, it's under fabric shops. So some of these shops do carry more than one thing, and in the kind of preamble for each of the listings, they will say it carries this, it carries just buttons, it carries everything. You know, there are obviously the shops are on a scale for that sort of thing. It also comes with 9 projects to make that are both knitted, crocheted and sewn, so a little bit of an extra there as well as a section on day trips in different cities or areas in the south of England. So if you're over for a visit perhaps and you're doing London but maybe you're going out to visit Oxford, there's a listing for Oxford, there's one for Cambridge, so quite a kind of nod to the tourism aspect, certainly, and giving a bit extra there in terms of once you've done London, what else could you do on your trip? Also, there are tons and tons of photographs of all the different shops and stuff they've got inside them, which is always good when you're trying to decide what you want to do, because London is not the smallest of places, and getting anywhere seems to take at least 45 minutes, if not an hour and a half, no matter what the distance is. So obviously you're going to want to make sure that if you're going to go and visit these places that it's worth your while, and that you fancy going, you know, and they're going to have stuff that you want to have a look at and potentially buy. So I think that is a strong point of the book as well. And we already know I do like a good photograph. I do like that visual aspect of it as well. I do put quite a heavy emphasis on that with things, especially pattern books, but with things like this as well, where you really need to get a feel for what you're going to be getting when you get there. They've also included a section on mini craft calls within London itself. So if you're going at a time when they're not doing the London yarn crawl and you want to do your own little version, then there are some suggested routes for you to try. When it comes to the patterns then, skipping to the important part, obviously, there are 9 patterns for various things in, as I said, knitted, crocheted and sewn format. And I'll give you a quick overview of what they are now, very brief, so you can get a feel for what's included. The first one is Because Sock Yarn, which is a mitts and scarf / shawlette set that's basically designed for a skein of sock yarn. Quite a cool idea, because quite often when we go and visit places we buy a souvenir skein, and this would be the ideal kind of project to team up with that. Then there's Candy Bag, which is a crocheted bag made up of individual granny squares. And this is handy because if you are travelling around, granny squares are quite small and easy to transport. Then there is Going Underground, which is a sewn bag with a wrist strap. What I particularly liked about this is there's a little pocket for your Oyster card within the bag, which is quite clever. Because they're a bit hardcore in London. It's like, no, you can't give me money. No, you've got to pay with a card. You're like, card all the time. Don't talk to anyone. Don't look at anyone. Just use the card. So it's quite handy, obviously, to have that very close by, because there's no messing about. If you don't have it to hand, if there's any faffing whatsoever, they talk, they huff, they're like moaning about it. Just like, you hate London, move out. If you hate London this much, just leave, really. I don't like London, can you tell? Nothing to do with the book, everything to do with how grumpy people are, because they spend hours commuting every day. Just move to the country, really. Next up is the Knightsbridge shawl. This is a lace shawl. Then there is the Knitter's Tool Roll, which is, as it sounds, it's a tool roll for your knitting stuff and sewing bits and pieces. Then there is La Vie de l'Amour. La Vie de l'Amour. Yeah, La Vie de l'Amour. Excuse my French. I haven't spoken French in a long time. Which are a pair of socks with an Eiffel Tower inspired pattern on them, which I'll come back to in a bit. And then the South Bank shawl is encompassing everything that I call masculine lace. It's a real lacy shawl, but it's not frou-frou like the Knightsbridge one, which is what I would call frou-frou lace. This is masculine lace. I quite like that one. Then we have the Waterloo mitts, which are a red, white and blue set of colourwork fingerless mitts designed by Alison and Rachel. They're quite cool. And then the Zigging hat and cowl, and that's a matching set in an Aran weight yarn. I'm not sure about the hat though, because it doesn't look long enough to go down over your ears. It looks like a hat, it finishes above your ears, which that would just bug me. It could just be the way the model's wearing it. It looks quite tight though. I'm not sure. I would have to have a look at it and try a sample on before I could pass judgment. But the cowl is very nice and the patterning on it is very nice too. So they are the patterns then that you get included in the book. So you've got your listings of your shops. You've got some suggested routes. You've got your patterns. You've got alternatives in other areas of the South UK. So what is my sort of verdict? I've got some good things as always, and I have some things that I would perhaps do differently, as always, because I like it to be balanced, and then you know that what I say is true, basically, and it is my honest opinion. Because I don't get paid for any of these. I don't get any, sort of top draw money for it. I only review things that I want to review, and I only review things that I think you're going to be interested in, and I always review them in an honest way and a constructive way, I hope. And there's never anything that's utterly dreadful, because if it was absolutely utterly dreadful, I would give them a chance to pull it first, because I'm not going to lie to you all. So basically, if it's rubbish, I'm like, do you really want me to, this is what I'm going to say, do you really want me to review this? Luckily, that's not the case with this one, although, as with everything, there are a few points of improvement. So what did I like? I really liked the amount of detail on each of the shops. There was a lovely big paragraph, great pictures to go with it. And what I also liked is with all of this, there were loads of tips about, oh, if you're hungry, go try this. This area is really famous for this. You know, you get great African fabrics here. If your hubby doesn't like, or your partner who's come with you doesn't like weaving, send them here because they like that. And loads of really good, it feels like a real insider's guide to all of these shops, which it is because they live there and they go to these shops all the time. I also like how they included suggested trips in the south of England just to make it a bit of a bigger document and to cater for that tourist market, as I said. And I like the way it was organised into your yarn, fabric and haberdashery section, and also the suggested little mini crawls that they put in of shops, which makes it a bit easier for you to figure out which ones you want to go and do, depending on whereabouts in London you are. Because as I've said, London is quite a big place. Certainly Greater London is a big place, and everything isn't as close to get to as you'd think, and there's a lot of travelling involved. What would I have done differently? First of all, to do with the patterns. Some of the pattern names or themes don't really make sense to me. I'm not really sure why there's an Eiffel Tower inspired pair of socks, and they are lovely, don't get me wrong, they are a beautiful pair of socks in a lovely British yarn. I don't see how that fits into a London craft guide. From a theming point of view, just looking at this as this is the theme of the product, this is what we're talking about, this is what we're advertising, we're all about London. I don't get that. And some of the other projects, I think, had really good themed London names and they fitted in really well. And some of the other projects could have had the names tweaked, I think, to make it feel a lot more kind of coherent. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with the projects at all, because as I've said, the Eiffel Tower socks are really pretty. I just don't get why they're in a London craft guide. So that's what I would have done differently, and it's not, it's no slight on the quality of the patterns or anything like that. This is purely I guess it's just superficial if you want to look at it like that. But I've got to be super critical. This is my opinion. So although they are lovely, and I'm not taking anything away from the actual designs and patterns, the way they're written, I've got no issues with any of that. I would just have preferred to see it all themed with London-based names, and also not all of the yarns are British. There are quite a lot of Canadian yarns in there, and I can see why, because obviously it's like pointing back to Alison being Canadian, and obviously Rachel is North American, and they are beautiful yarns. If it was me, I would have had all British yarns, ideally all London yarns, and ideally all London designers, because I just feel that would have made it a more coherent product. That being said, the other yarns that we used were really nice yarns. This is how I would do it. Also, one thing that I thought was a really obvious omission, and this is because I'm a geographer and I have got a thing about maps, clearly, there is no map. There is no map in there, and I just think I would really have liked to see a map with within London, little dots to show where things were, even if it wasn't like a super detailed map, and just even an illustrated stylized map or something, just for me to be able to see spatially where things are, because otherwise it can be quite difficult to figure out, well, I don't want to follow your set route. Maybe you live in northwest London and you want to do a couple in West London, a couple in North London, but they're not grouped like that. So I would have put a map in, and I think that would have really added to the whole book without being a big deal and for it only being one page. But other than that, as I said, on the good point, they're my only not so that's what I wouldn't have done points. And actually, are you going to die in a ditch from any of them? No, it's just that's the way I would have done it. But I think, the amount of detail you get on shops and all the little tips if you're visiting, I think are the real strength of this book, rather than necessarily the patterns. I think the book could probably have stood on its own without all the patterns in, although they're a nice addition. So, in summary, if you're going to go to London and you want to go and see the yarn shops and things, this would be a really quick way for you to get a really good overview of everything that's available there. But you won't have a map. So The recommended retail price for this is £16.50 for a print copy, and you can get a digital copy for £14, and it is available from yarninthecity.com. So considering you're getting 9 patterns for that, and some of them are like 2-in-1 because you get the hat and cowl, and you get the hat, the scarf and mitts, so it's 11 really, for £14 digital. You know, that's pretty good value on the pattern front. So definitely worth a look. As I say, you can find everything to do with the London Craft Guide, which this is my review thereof, by Yarn in the City, Alison Thistlewood and Rachel Brown at yarninthecity.com. On to Wippin Piccadilly then. And there hasn't been a lot of whipping going on. Now, I appreciate since I started the podcast, there has been a lot of people join in that maybe missed the initial reason why it's called Wippin Piccadilly section. And Wippin Piccadilly, with an H, not without the H, as in the Whippin work in progress Piccadilly, is a song by Gomez, who are an sort of indie band. And the song just inspired the name Wippin Piccadilly because I like the song. And I don't think I'm going to sing it for you right now, but it basically goes, once upon a time, not too long ago, I took a day out in Manchester. We all fall down, there's not enough hours in the day. And then at one point I used to play part of the song, and it used to go, it's very catchy. I'll put a link in the show notes. You can go watch the video and admire Gomez. And that's why it was called Wippin Piccadilly and not, On the Needles or any other kind of actually knitting related name. But On the Needles, Wippin Piccadilly, whatever you call it, this is the works in progress section. And there are a few works in progress. First up we have Voodoo by BritNyKnits. Yes, I'm still knitting the Shinybees along project from January. I am knitting the pattern Voodoo by BritNyKnits. It's a beaded shawl. It is available on Ravelry, and I'm knitting it in the Golden Skeins Autumn Yarn by Travel Knitter, and it is a 50% baby camel, 50% silk yarn, and it's a glorious red colour, and I'm very, very much enjoying the process of knitting it. I'm currently at the cast off part. It's a picot cast off, which is taking me actually forever. It's ridiculous. I've watched about 5 or 6 episodes of House of Cards, and granted this may be a bad idea because House of Cards is not conducive to concentrating on casting off, because you're sort of gripped and you have to stop and look at the screen and see what Frank and Claire are up to. And doesn't she have the most fantastic shoes? And how does she have such a long, graceful, unwrinkled neck? How is that? And how can she have like quite flat hair and it still look really nice? I'm distracted by all of these things, but mostly because they're doing, really crazy stuff, and I have to stop and look up and just stop knitting and concentrate because I'm aghast at what's happening. So maybe it is my choice of viewing material whilst casting off, or maybe it's a picot cast off and it takes forever, especially when it's like a 500 and odd stitch cast off to start with, and then for every stitch you're adding 2 more stitches and then casting them off. It's quite long, but I need the cable that I've used for that to cast on my sparkly Lush, my sparkly red Lush. So at the moment I can't actually cast it on because I refuse to buy another cable, because if I do it'll sit there forever, so I've got to force myself to cast it off. I've really loved doing the pattern, and I got some beads, even though I ran out of beads, and my usual supply, crystals and ice, were out of beads also. And the annoying thing about bead purveyors on the internet is that they don't label it by the actual name. So I went to search for the name that I'd bought it under, and nobody had. When actually, if I looked under the product number, they did have, because they've all got a different descriptor for that name, so obviously it doesn't come up in the searches. So I found someone else that could send me the beads, and I got them sent out. They didn't arrive in time for my big trip to Vegas, so I ended up casting something else on. I'll talk about that in a minute, but basically, yeah, I finished all of the beading stuff, and I just love beading. I just love beaded knitting. I don't know what it is, because it's not the quickest, but it's just super satisfying for me. I know some people don't like it, like lovely Ecky Thump Helen, who's a super ninja knitter, and I always look and think, I wish I could knit as quickly as you and as nicely as you do. She hates beaded knitting, and it isn't for everyone. But if you've been thinking about trying it and you haven't, Jane Burns, who you'll find at janeburns.co.uk, has just released a super cool how to learn to bead, or how to do beaded knitting in 26 seconds video. It's really good. And honestly, I thought beaded knitting was a really big thing and dead hard. And then when I saw a few YouTube videos, I was like, yeah, it's not that hard. And it really isn't. But as I've said before, YouTube videos can be really hit and miss. And she's just done a video, and literally, if you watch that, you will do a beaded knitting project. You will try it, because it makes it so look as easy as it actually is, basically. So I'll put a link to that one in the show notes as well. She's just released a book on beaded socks, which is interesting, and I'll be reviewing that in a couple of weeks. But in the meantime, I'm still battling with my Boo Knit shawl, and I do love it, but I just want it cast off. Now, she does offer 2 cast-offs for this project, one of which is a crocheted one, and that looks quite gothic. It's got the really long, really typical looking Boo shawl, really long, pointy, dramatic edging, which is the crochet cast off, and you put another bead on the bottom of that. And I do have enough beads left, but I just didn't want anything too... It is a little bit gothic for me, but not massively. But it was more a case of, obviously with the children and stuff, having little thin bits of yarn with a bead on the end, I don't really know how practical that is. So I decided to go for the Pico cast off instead, despite knowing how absolutely painful it is to conduct this type of cast off. I decided to do it anyway. So I'm working my way through that, but the pattern itself is super, super easy to follow, and I've really enjoyed knitting it, and I'm looking forward to picking up my next Boo shawl and cracking on with that. As I mentioned, I also cast on a new project. You probably saw it on Instagram. I was on the plane and decided I was going to treat myself to a cast on, and I had 3 seats to myself, so I had my feet up on the plane, and I had this new cast on, and it was Frisson by Brittany Wilson. I am knitting this for my amazing assistant LJ, who is not a knitter yet, but is very, very perilously close to becoming one. And it's knit in the Toil and Trouble Patagonicus yarn from the Golden Skeins winter quarter, which was last year. And it's a really pretty sort of dark grey, light grey, mint green and natural sort of colourway. It's coming out really pretty. I like the way that the pattern is turning out. It's going to be really nice because it's not too frou-frou, because she's not a frou-frou kind of girl at all. So it's masculine lace. I do like a bit of masculine lace. And garter stitch, and really kind of flexible, and she really liked that yarn, so I decided I was going to knit her something in it, and I'm enjoying it. The pattern, I have to say, is a bit confusing. I got confused at several points during the pattern so far about what I should be doing where, because of the way it was worded. Now, I'm sure this has nothing whatsoever to do with the gin consumption. I'd only had 1 gin, and I'm used to knitting after gin, so this should not have been a problem. But I think because I'm very kind of loyal to certain designers, and they have a very particular way of explaining things, and it is very explicit what you need to do with these designers, like your Claire Divines and your Boo Knits. When someone sort of doesn't write it that way, I find it a bit more difficult to follow and understand it. So once I got my head around the way that they'd written it, I was fine. But I don't know if they had a tech editor, but they probably needed one. But the pattern, is good. It's pretty. The yarn is very nice to knit with, and it's coming out in a really tonal, pretty way. So I think although she's not a pretty type of girl, I think she's going to enjoy this item when it's finished. So I need to kind of carry on with that. And otherwise, I'm just waiting to cast on my Lush by TinCanKnits for the rewind knit along. Everyone else is cracking on. Some people have finished. There's some really cute little Lush projects. There's some really cute Team Not Lush, #Team Not Lush projects over in the thread. There's still plenty of time to join in if you want to, because I've not started yet because I need the cable. And it seems to be going really well over there. Having quite a lot of fun. People are, some people doing the first ever garment, which is amazing. And we're all having a good time. So I'm just savouring it. I'm so looking forward to casting that on once I get this cable back and get it finished. I'm not looking forward to blocking the Voodoo. There should be a service. There should totally be a service for blocking. There should be a service for casting off, frankly. But there should definitely be a service for blocking of knits, because it's going to be totes fiddly. But worth it, I'm sure, because the yarn is beautiful. It's going to be one of those real statement pieces when it's finished. And then, of course, I'll get to knit my beautiful sparkly red cardigan. So that's what I'm working on at the moment. In terms of my commit for the year, my word for the year, and my committed projects for the year, I'm currently at no finished garments. But it's good. I'm enjoying my knitting. I don't get an awful lot of time to knit. And I'm enjoying the knitting that I am doing. So, yeah, we'll see. I mean, my Owligan cardigan is getting there. I'm on the sleeves, but that's sort of been put to one side for more exciting beaded projects. So, I have no update in regards to my 4 garments for the year commitment, but I'm sure next quarter there will be. It's a goal. It's not set in stone. If you set knitting goals at the beginning of the year and you're not meeting them because you want to knit something else, you know what? That is fine. That is fine. It's all about knitting what you want to knit in the time frame that you want to knit it. And if you want to change your mind, change your mind. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just all about avoiding that disappointment of not achieving what you wanted to achieve, regardless of whether you've changed your mind about what you wanted to achieve or not. So I'm still looking to achieve the same goal, but it's just going to be compressed in other areas of the year, I think, and that's that really. So that's my roundup of what I'm working on at the moment and what's Wippin Piccadilly as it was. And I don't really have a fancy knit at the moment. I'm being quite restrained. I'm keen to get into this Lush cardigan, so that's sort of taking up all my mental space. But get yourself on to the group on Ravelry or email me and let me know what you're working on and what you've got on your Wippin Piccadilly list at the moment, because everybody loves a bit of enabling. So share your patterns with me and maybe I can get even less done. But get plenty of inspiration along the way. So I'm afraid that's all we have time for this week. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Next week, you can look forward to Helen Stewart of the Curious Handmade podcast coming onto the show and doing an interview with my good self, talking about all of her design work. She's really good fun. I quite like her. And in the meantime, all that remains for me to say is I hope you'll have a great week. Happy crafting, and I'll speak to you all again soon. Bye. You've been listening to the Shinybees podcast, a podcast for those who like their knitting, comedy and yarn in equally large measures. If you'd like to get in contact with me, you can do so via the blog, or on Shinybees on Ravelry, Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest and Facebook. You can email me at shinybeesinfo@gmail.com. Music for this episode is provided by Music Alley, and it is Adam and the Water Boys and I Need a Drink.
I need a drink.